to everyone joining today's session on managing freight orders. Good morning, good afternoon. I will continue to accept any latecomers. Just take a look at the chat if you can. If you've also looked at the invite that was sent yesterday, you'll see the topics that we're going to cover today. Basically, understanding what managing freight orders means in TM. These are specific to the roles of TS02, TS08, for those of you who are managing freight orders from UN-owned equipment scenarios or STO scenarios. We're going to learn how to assign carriers and freight purchase orders to either single freight orders or multiple freight orders at the same time. Also learn how to update these freight orders, their locations, dates, and charges once we've received final confirmation from our carriers, once we've solicited freight, right, through our shopping cart for freight. And also we will learn how to delete the freight orders if we made a mistake in planning, if that was necessary. And then also the updating of the main carriage of freight orders and why the updating of locations has to be done only in the main carriage of these freight orders, as well as how it can also be done through the freight units in some exceptional cases. Okay, so you should all see the screen of TM now that I'm sharing with you. I'm still admitting some latecomers here, but everyone should already be part of the session. So right now I'm in TM, and what I'm going to do basically, as we've covered through the other sessions that we did earlier this week and last week, I'm going to search for my DTRs. So basically just search for your DTRs because I want to go over some of the basic navigation in TM, although these are not actions that are directly related to a TS02 or a TS08. I think they're still important as a quick refresher. So what I'm doing here is I'm searching for DTR documents, and now I'm going to do so by date instead of by PO or DTR number or inbound delivery number. I just want to see all my DTR documents by delivery date. So basically I'm going to be using these two fields, delivery date from and delivery date to. I'm going to select an early date, maybe November 1st, and then a delivery date to, and I'm going to go to all the way up to May. And when you do that and you click on apply, you should see all your results for any DTRs, so any transport requirements that are either pending, planned. It doesn't really matter the status that they're in, they're going to show up regardless. If I scroll to the right a bit here, we see that we have some of these that are already planned, some that are still in planning. We have the date they were created by and the execution status. So for none of them, the execution status has yet begun, which means no one has started submitting events for these yet. So first of all, and before I start clicking on some of these DTRs, I think it's important for you guys to understand that from this result page, if you guys go to the Open Settings dialog, I believe there are some columns that are quite important for you to know that they are originally hidden, but we can make them displayed in this result page. So one of the columns that I want to show in this case here is the Incoterm field, which I believe is very important. And you'll see why when we want to do some filtering. So basically I filtered for Incoterm field here. I select it and I move it over to the displayed columns. I want this to be all the way at the beginning. So I'm selecting this, pushing it up to the top. And I also want to have my delivery date very near my DTR and my Incoterms as well. So I'm going to see for delivery date here, original order category. Here we go. So we have our delivery date from or to, so we can always push that up to the beginning as well. And maybe if we want to search for our delivery date to, if it's here, if not, we can always add it and push that up to the front. So let's see, based on the few things that I just did now, what my screen looks like. So I'm going to click on OK, and I have my delivery date from, and I have my Incoterm column here as well. So basically what I want to work on today is Incoterms that are FCA. So I can always filter further through this column and go to the FCA Incoterms only, so I can reduce my search. And maybe I want to see my delivery dates, only the ones that are in the future, so I can also either select them from here, or I can just sort in descending order. So I have the latest to the earliest here displayed. So I see some of these are requirements for transportation in May, some in March, some in December. I'm going to stick to the ones in December. And I also want to see their planning status. So maybe what you can do here is basically just drag the column of the delivery status here, the planning status, sorry, right here, and the execution as well. Okay, take a look at any of the other columns that are displayed here and see if any of them may be useful for you. You can always drag them and have them as a cross-referencing information. So we have our original order here as well. And basically that's the information that I would need to understand what I want to plan, not plan, and what I want to show you guys. So basically just looking at this screen, I can see that I have a series of DTR documents that are FCA Incoterm, that the delivery date is set for May 18th. And some of these are planned and still pending to be planned. The same thing for March and even for December here. Okay, I see some other people are joining the session, so I'm admitting you guys all. Please make sure you mute yourselves when you log in. So based on this, what I want to do is first show you guys a bit of the planning. We're going to go through the planning, but very quickly because we did that yesterday, just to show you the results of some of these plannings. Also make sure that whatever I'm planning for is already packed properly so we can see the estimated charges that are generated. And today I'm selecting FCAs because I want you to understand when you're planning transportation for FCAs, how the system will display those freight orders that are already planned because they're vendor delivered and those that are yet to be planned because they're freight forwarder delivered. And I'm doing this on purpose so you can see that later on we can always assign the carriers to these that are freight forwarder delivered versus the ones that are vendor delivered and how we can see the difference from one and the other. So I'm going to stick to the ones that are earlier in terms of date. So I could even select the 15th here, which says here in planning, or I can select the 20th. So I'm basically going to start with this one here first. And remember, as I was showing you guys yesterday, if we want to, we can simply select a line here and go directly to the transportation cockpit. Now, to do this, I would have to be the TS01 or TS07. Okay, I haven't yet switched to the TS02, TS08 roles. I'm just going to go quickly through the transportation cockpit and make sure that I plan this DTR. So I'm clicking on transportation cockpit here. And quickly, we will probably be directed to our planning profile page, which I explained yesterday. Now, in this case, they're already set up, so I would simply have to just select the one for FCA because that's the one I'm planning for. That's why it was important, if you guys see in the screen that I was displaying before, that I added an Incoterm column, so I know exactly what I'm looking for. And now that we have our FCA screen here, our planning profile, we simply select the line, click on continue, and now go to our transportation cockpit page, which should have displayed my freight unit, right? We have a series of freight units here. We also, remember, we were showing yesterday the freight order section. Now let me see, because I think the screen is still being shared here. Just give me a second. I want to make sure the screen is still being shared. Can everyone see my screen? I believe it's still okay. If not, just please add that in the chat. I think so far we are still okay. All right, so we have in our screen here the transportation cockpit. That's what you should all be seeing. And we have, sorry, a series of freight units here to be planned. If you see right from the screen here, we have the items column, and some of these items are packed and others are not. So we could directly filter by those who are packed properly and only see those freight units that I can actually plan because they're the ones that have been packed properly here. All right, I'm paying attention to the chat. I think everybody can still see my screen here. Just let me know if you can or not. All right, so we have our freight units here to be packed. We also have the stages. We should have also our dates, latest request date. So we could always move this column to the left if we want to make sure and cross-reference that information, or we can simply maximize our screen as we showed yesterday, and we can see the dates, the freight units, DTRs, and those that are packed already. So we see none of these have been planned. So I'm going to plan quickly the one for probably here. Let's see, we have December. We can also sort these in descending. So we have either the earliest or the latest, if we do so in ascending. So we have here the 1227 should be the one that I want to plan for. This is the one I'm going to select. We explained the process of how to use the cockpit, how to manage your cockpit, also change some of these columns as we showed yesterday, and we went through some of the transportation proposal filters. So I'm not going to cover that. I'm going to simply go quickly through the planning of this freight unit, which is linked to this DTR, which is packed as we can see, and the delivery date is the 27th here. So we see this one should be okay, and I click on transportation proposals. And let's see the proposals that I get for this. Okay, so we're getting an error right now. So let's just do that again. Let me select the one I believe was this one here now because the date was different. So let me go to the cockpit again and excuse the glitch in the system. I'm going to select again the planning profile FCA, continue. Hopefully this time we don't get a system error. Again, as I was doing before, I'm simply filtering by those that are packaged, and I'm selecting the one for December. Okay, so we have December 27th right here. I'm selecting this line, and let me just plan this one. Hopefully now we don't have a glitch in the system. All right, so I'm going to do this one more time. Guys, sorry, just bear with me for a second. Hopefully the third time is a charm. Let's see. If not, I'll just use one that is already planned, and we'll skip on the planning as a refresher. Okay, we'll just use one of those that is already working fine. Again, I'm selecting the ones that are packaged. I believe it's the first one here, and let me see if this works this time. Okay, so third time was a charm. Perfect. Okay, so we have our results for the transportation proposal. Again, we explained all this yesterday and how this works. The only thing I want to remark today is that if you realize the screen is a bit different from what it looked like yesterday, because yesterday we were planning for X-Work scenarios, and now it's an FCA scenario. What that means is that we have some stages that are vendor delivered that are already planned, and some that are going to be freight forwarder delivered that are still to be planned. So basically, if we take a look at our screen here, we have stage one, and we have our planning status column. That for the stage one doesn't show a sort of an envelope with a green check mark. That's for, it seems like, my first stage, which goes from our source location to Dubai port. And what the system is telling me is that we're going to be planning for stage two and stage three, where we have our actual let's say orange looking envelopes here with a green check mark. So we're planning basically our main leg and our on carriage. Okay, so we have here a pre, main, and on. We have our three stages. And we're basically just planning for the last two here, for Dubai port to Brindisi port, which would be our main carriage. And that's going to be important when we start changing the locations in the freight orders, because this is the one we would make a change to. We always change the main carriage, which is the one going from a port to another port or from one airport to another. Okay, those are the ones we would be making changes to. If, let's say, once we get the final or the actual transportation route from the freight forwarder, this is the leg that we would be making changes to, not the ones for the pre-leg or the on-leg, which is the last one. So let's say I'm going to go with the first proposal here for this freight unit and say that I'm happy with that and I can accept the planning. This should now show me here in my freight order section it shows me 3 freight orders. One of them that is already planned here, and if I hover over the actual freight order number, we can see that it's the one for the vendor delivered freight order, which is from source location to Dubai port. So that one was already planned. Okay, those happen automatically in the system. Anything that is vendor delivered is automatically planned by the system and will show here. And then the other 2 legs, the one that I have just selected transportation proposals for, are here. Okay, they're still planning to be, they're still pending to be accepted, sorry. And that's why they show with these different digits. Okay, the $ with the 1 and the 2. It has to show with a 61 acronym number here, with a 61 number to show me that I have actually completed my planning. You see here to the left, I have 3 freight units. They're actually duplicated numbers. So we have 627 3 times here, one for our first stage. That was the first one that is here, that is already planned, and the other 2 stages that I'm planning for, the 2 and the 3, which are these 2 here. So everything is going well so far. We have our DTR number 627 that is linked to our freight unit 1350. And that's the one we're planning for. I'm going to go with save. And now these 2 should change now to the freight order number. So everything is fine here. Okay, we have now our 3 stages. 1 for the vendor delivered and 2 for the freight forwarder delivered. I can navigate directly to my freight unit. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to close the cockpit behind that, so I don't need to go back to that screen. Let me just move the screen out of the way so I see if I have any message. Okay, and here we go. Okay, so I'm now looking at my freight unit document, the one that I have just planned, 1350. I'm going to my document flow tab, and I see that I have my freight unit, DTR, inbound, and my 3 freight orders. Basically, the first one, it says here, vendor delivered. So this was the one that the system automatically planned for me. And I have the other 2, which are the ones I planned. You can see below in the item section that we have our item that has been packed properly, and it has its gross weight entered as well, volume, dimensions, everything seems to look good and is quite accurate. I can also, in the freight unit document, which is very useful for you guys, is to go to the stages tab to understand all different stages. We have stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, which shows us each individual stage, the date of delivery, the means of transportation. And if we scroll to the right, we have some more details on the time of delivery, the dates, and also which carrier is going to be transporting the goods. So in this sense, we have our carrier here for the vendor delivered stage is already displayed, and we have 2 others, which are freight forwarder, that will always show up as default as Z dummy until we assign the carrier. And that's what we're going to be doing today as well, assigning the carrier to these 2. All right, so just wanted to show you quickly this. Let's go back to the document flow tab. And let's select one of the freight orders. Okay, so basically, now that I have planned the transportation for that freight unit, I have a freight order. I actually have 2 in this case. We have the one here that I'm looking at that is leading my document flow. If we go to the charges tab, what we should have in this charges tab is an actual estimated calculation. We should have it. Okay, sometimes the training environment doesn't show me that. So in this case, the estimated charge does not display. Nonetheless, we should have an estimated charge here. And maybe I can navigate to another freight order to show you that. And what we will be doing today is adding the actual charge to these freight orders. So first of all, we have our freight orders. I'm looking at the charges tab. That's the one that we're going to be going to in a second. We can go to the execution tab, which is going to show me the events for this freight order. Basically, the events that either as a TM planner I'm going to be submitting, or as a carrier they'll be submitting in CCP. We'll go through this in more detail in tomorrow's session. But today, I basically want to cover this, the charges tab. I want you guys to take a look at that and remember this tab. And also a quick reminder of what we saw yesterday. If we go to the output management tab, what we see here is the SOW form. So we've gone through this already through 3 different sessions. Remember, the SOW form is the one we're going to be attaching to the shopping cart for freight. It's going to be including our information as per the PO, inbound, and all freight orders linked to this document. Remember, you can download it. It can be edited offline. And basically what the SOW will show is a requirement for transportation. It's going to show the Incoterm, the origin location and destination location. And if we have performed our packing properly, we should have our information on the packing here. It's in a container, the package ID, which is the handling unit, and the dimensions of the goods. We also have the weight as we see here, and then the value of the goods that are being transported. Remember, you can download this and add any relevant notes. We have our origin address here and our destination information here as well. So the idea now would be, now that these freight orders are generated, that I have planned my freight units, the idea is that as TS02s and TS08, we should download this form, the SOW form, and attach it to our shopping cart for freight. So now the process begins to solicit freight for the transportation of the goods for two of the stages. We can either have one carrier transport the goods all the way from the handover location to the final destination, or we can have two separate ones, however it works in your mission or however you do this usually. But what is important is that we need to download this form, the SOW form. We need to make sure that it displays the accurate information, add any notes if we have to offline or any other information that we deem necessary, and attach it to the shopping cart for freight. Then the process of soliciting freight would occur. Basically, we would receive the final and actual not only route that the carrier is going to be transporting our goods through, but also the new locations that they may be going through, because remember that if we go back to our freight unit document here, the one that I'm displaying on screen, if I go to stages, we estimated that our planned route would be from our source location to Dubai port, from Dubai port to Brindisi port, and from Brindisi port to final destination. That doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be the case. This doesn't mean that the freight forwarder is going to follow this route. This is our estimation based on the data that we've compiled so far into the system. But we will still wait for the actual route that the carrier is going to deliver for us, and also the actual cost, the dates of the delivery, and any other changes that as TS02 and TS08 we would have to make into our freight orders once we receive the final and actual from the carriers. So now that we do have it, let's say that we've received this final confirmation, what we would have to do is go back to our main screen here, and now as TS02 or TS08, we would have to assign the carrier to the particular freight order. So we know that we have a freight unit, and we also have our inbound delivery document for the freight unit that we planned. Let me just make sure that what we're looking at here is the same one. So I'm going to go to this DTR number, make sure that the document that I'm going to assign is the correct one. So it's the 1350. We also have our inbound delivery document number here if we need to search by that one. And to go and now search for all our freight orders, the ones that are linked to this freight unit, DTR, and inbound delivery document, what we do is we now go to the freight order management tab. And here we can overview our freight orders as TS02, TS08. And we can add the information linked to our inbound delivery. If we see that we have now in the freight orders, overview freight order screen, we have a series of fields to search from. And let me see if I heard something, nothing in the chat so far. Okay, perfect. So we are now in the freight order overview screen. And what I'm going to be doing is searching by inbound delivery number. We can search by any other means here. We see that we have tons of other details, but let's go to change query. We probably haven't seen this yet in our other webcast, but if you go to change query, you'll see that you have a series of fields that are not displayed in the original section here. And what we can do in this one is add our either PO, STO, or inbound delivery document. And if we add the correct one, we should see all the freight orders that are linked to this inbound delivery. And as TS02s and TS08s, once we click on apply, we should be able to see all the freight orders that are linked to that inbound. Okay, so now that we have the actual carrier who's going to transport our goods from the handover location to our destination location, we see here, based on the inbound delivery document that I just added under the Freight Order Management tab, Overview Freight Orders section, we have 1, 2, and 3 freight orders. If you take a look at this screen, which is very important to understand, is that we see one of the freight orders here is linked to the Carrier International Armored Group. So basically, we understand that this one is the one that is vendor delivered. So we don't have to do anything with this freight order. What we are doing is we're adding or assigning the carrier that is going to transport our goods for the last remaining stages, and also assign the freight PO. So basically, to do this, and this is one of the key learning objectives of today's session, is how do we assign the carrier and freight PO to these freight orders? So we have them here. We can either select them both and assign the same carrier to both of these freight orders. We can do that going through subcontracting, clicking on assign carrier and SRM freight PO. And then here we would add our carrier and freight purchase order if we want to do this simultaneously. If we want to just do it for one, we can simply select one line and assign one carrier to one line, and then go to the other one and assign a new one to the last one. We can also navigate to the freight order itself, and you see once you're in that freight order, we can go to any other tab. For example, here we go to Business Partner tab, and we can click on Edit and change the carrier for this particular stage. Okay, for one freight order, we can change it here as well. We can go to subcontracting as well and make the change here as well for the carrier. Okay, so you can do it directly into the freight orders themselves, or you can do it directly from the main screen, which is here. So I'm going to assign the same one to both. I'm going to select both of these. I'm going to go to subcontracting, assign carrier and SRM freight PO. And now is when I'm going to be assigning that carrier that is actually going to be transporting our goods. So this should be right here. Again, you see that the system displays, okay, this is going to be the carrier Scan Global Logistics. So you can click on that, and that will keep that here based on our master data. And then the freight PO, which you would be adding manually, because in this case, TM and SRM are not linked together. So they're linked together from when we're talking about the shopping cart for goods, but they're not linked together as of yet when we're talking about the shopping cart for freight. So we have to add our freight purchase order manually to these freight orders here. Once we click on OK, the system should tell us that they've been updated. Now we see no changes here automatically, but if we click on refresh, we should see that both these freight orders have now changed to Scan Global Logistics. Now here we go. We have all our freight orders linked and assigned to our particular either vendor or freight forwarder. So now, why is this important and why have we done this? Now, if we don't assign the carriers properly, these carriers will not have access to the freight orders in the carrier collaboration portal. This CCP, also we call it CCP, is essential for them to, and when I'm saying them, I mean vendors and freight forwarders, for them to see our freight orders, the ones that we have here, and be able to submit events in CCP for these particular freight orders. If we don't assign or don't assign it properly, the carriers will not have access to these freight orders and will not be able to submit events in CCP. Now, in those particular cases, of course, we could always, as TM planners, these would be TS01s and 08s, would have to submit the events on their behalf in TM. That's why it's very important for the roles of TS02 and 08 to assign the carriers properly in TM. Now that we have assigned them properly and we have also linked the freight PO to these, we know that both the carriers will have access in CCP to submit events, and we'll see how that's done tomorrow. And we can also submit on their behalf in TM as TM planners for these two freight orders. Okay, so that was the first step in our webcast today, was to assign the carriers to freight orders and also assign the freight PO. Now let's take a look at these documents individually. I'm going to navigate to one of these, let's say 28874. And what I want to do in this screen now is show you guys as a TS02 or TS08 what I would be doing if I had to make changes to any of the locations, dates, and charges. So I'm taking a look at one of my freight orders here. I can go to the Stages tab to understand what stage this is. So basically, I'm seeing that this is the stage that goes from Brindisi port, destination, sorry, goes from Dubai port to Brindisi port. So actually, I've clicked on the one that is equivalent to the main carriage. This is the one that I would be making changes to in TM if I have to change any locations. So let's say that the freight forwarder is not going through Dubai port. They're actually selecting a different port, or maybe they're not going to Brindisi port, but going to a different port. So we would have to mainly change these locations here. All right, so I'm going to get back to this in a second. And also in this same stage tab, we can make the changes to the actual planned delivery date. So we have the planned arrival information here. We have the planned departure, and we can make changes to those, okay, by simply clicking on edit. So before I do any of that, let me also navigate to our next tab. The one that's also going to be very important for us is the charges tab. This is the tab where whoever's managing the freight order, so TS02s, TS08s, would have to go to and make changes to the actual charges. So to do that, in the charges tab, if you go down to the packaging information where our items actually are, you'll see that you have several lines here. One for estimated charge, which should already have your estimated charges based on the rate tables that the master data contains, which are performing calculations based on the gross volume of the goods. Now, as we said yesterday, these calculations can be changed, so we can see the calculation also based on the transportation for the zone or location or country that we're delivering the goods to. In this case, the rate table is displaying the calculation based on gross volume. Okay, we can add the charges manually here as well when we click on edit. But basically, I just want to show you first the two tabs that are very important here as TS02s, TS08, Charges tab and Stages tab if we want to make any changes to locations and dates. Okay, so those are our roles as TS02, TS08. First, assign a carrier. Then we also have to assign the freight PO. If we scroll down, there's an option if we want to. You see here the document references section that I've added. You add this manually because it's usually not displayed. This document reference section will show all documents that are linked to this freight order. So this freight order particularly is linked to a transportation request, which is a DTR 627, to the inbound delivery 812, and also to the purchase order, which is ending in 44, and also the freight purchase order. So we have all our documents coming from SRM and one in TM that are linked to this freight order here. To add these sections, yesterday I went through this briefly, and I can do this again. You simply go to the personalization box here, open personalization dialog box, and play around with the stacks and columns that are here displayed. We see if we scroll down that we have several stacks. So every stack is a different section. That's why we have our document references in a different section and the change documents as well. So this is a very good setup. We can add more columns that are maybe not displayed by clicking on add. And we can also have communication history, cost distribution, customs, handling codes, load planning, even the map if we want to see the exact location of this stage. And by simply selecting these and clicking on OK, these would be displayed again as a new stack here. We can always select one of these and combine them together and say, you know what, I want to see my document references with my changed documents, or I want to see them all together. You can always select them both, click on the arrow, and they would all be part of one section and simply be different tabs. Okay, so basically what I want to do, for example, is change documents and add them to my first stack. And you see here, now we only have 2 stacks. If I save, we should only have our change document here. Now is one of the tabs. So I can go back here and navigate to my stages tab. So you guys can see that we still have our section at the top and our document reference at the bottom. Okay, so that was just a quick reminder of how you can manipulate your page so you can have different displays. So now let's perform a change in locations. So we have 2 options. Basically, in FCA scenarios, since we're talking about handover locations, you can also make changes to locations under the freight unit, but that should be an exceptional case. Okay, there are some times when you're changing the stages locations, for example, in the main carriage. Always remember you're doing this in the main carriage. When you're changing this, you click on edit and you make a change to any of the source or destination location. For example, if I go to Dubai port and I select the matchbox, what I will have is the locations, right? For example, if I say I want to add a new location here, maybe I want to add contains, and maybe instead of the port, we're going through an airport, or we're going through a different location, a different port itself. So by simply adding information related to the new location, I will have a display of these new available ports in master data in TM that I can select from. Okay, so basically by adding the actual name of the port that now we're selecting, we can make a change and go through a different port. So basically you see you have tons of options here. So we could select one that is more appropriate, the one that the freight forwarder has told us that they want to go by. Instead of it being Dubai port, we want to select a different one. We can do that as well. Yeah, we would simply have to select if we want to do Dubai International Airport in this case. And the destination location would, instead of being Brindisi port, maybe it's an airport in Brindisi. So we can change that as well to contains and look for airport. Let's click on search and see if we get any results for that, and we do. And you have also a series of airports here, and you would simply select the one that is that has been told by the freight forwarder. So we have several options here as well. Okay, once you have selected the correct one, for example, in this case, I'm going to go with the Brindisi Airport. You have already changed the source location, destination location. You can also make the changes to the planned departure date by selecting from the calendar and saying, you know what, instead of the 20th, it's going to be done the 19th, or it's going to be done the 21st, or any other date that you want to add here. Okay, so basically that should change all the information, not only from this freight order, but the other freight orders that are automatically going to update and add in any new stages or reduce the stages depending on the new locations I'm adding. Now, there are some cases where if I save and the system gives me a warning and says that if I make this huge change to the locations, the planning is going to go haywire. What that means is that instead of making the changes through here, maybe the best thing would be to delete the planning and replan again so we can have that done properly, because if not, it's not going to work properly for us. So if I make this change and I save and the system says, okay, time conflict, see we have a conflict here, and we have a time conflict basically in the date and time that we wanted to have the vendor delivered stage. So you see here, probably by changing the date, the vendor delivered stage is in conflict with the new changes that we made to the location. So always pay attention to the changes in locations and how they conflict with probably the first stage, which is the vendor delivered stage. We see we have a warning in the system here that tells us that if we're making this change, the one that I just did now from port to airport, I'm conflicting with the initial planned vendor stage. Okay, so maybe we don't want to make this change. We can still cancel this change and replan differently so we have new freight orders that are more similar to the actual route that the freight forwarder is delivering. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to cancel that so I don't make any big changes. Okay, we can go back to our document flow, because I also want to show you that these changes can be performed under the freight unit. It's one of the learning objectives of today's session as well. So if I click on the freight unit, there's also an option, especially for FCA scenarios, where we can make changes under the stages tab as well to the change Incoterm location. So let's say that the handover location is changed, and that's the one that I was changing in the freight order. We can also click on edit under the freight unit and make a change to the Incoterm location or the discharge port, okay, which is really the equivalent to the main carriage in the freight order that we were editing before. Okay, so we have our change Incoterm location, and we simply select the new location. And we would pretty much do the same process as we were just doing before. Instead of the airport, we're now looking for port. And we would perform exactly the same changes, but now we're doing so from the freight unit instead of from the freight order. This is done only in exceptional cases and only for FCA scenarios where we're changing our Incoterm location. Okay, so basically I wanted to cover those two changes for you. You can change either in the freight order and make sure you're looking at the main carriage, or you can do so in the freight unit by changing it in the stages, and again only changing Incoterm location and discharge port. Okay, I'm taking a look at the chat, see if anyone has added any questions here. Okay, thanks for confirming that you guys could see the screen. Let me just take a look at some of the questions that we see here in the chat. So we have one here. At which stage SOW is attached to the shopping cart? Is it after PO is raised or before PO is raised? Okay, so again, the SOW should be attached to the shopping cart for freight. So basically it's before the PO is raised, right? So when you're raising your shopping cart for freight, you're raising it with the SOW attached already to it. Okay, then I see one here from Sasha. I joined late, excuse me. Let's see. Would it be possible to show how route stages are amended to reflect actual route in case of different than planned? Okay, so basically is what I was showing now. What if actual route contains additional stages which are not planned? Okay, very good, Sasha. So basically, if the changes are very drastic, and by changing them in the main carriage, the system doesn't automatically update and add new freight orders or changes the locations, like I was saying before. If you have a conflict in what we have originally planned and now what we have to actually deliver in the system, right, what the freight forwarders have told us to, the best thing would be, of course, to delete the freight orders and replan and have a more accurate planning. Okay, I know that would change your freight orders, that would change your SOWs, but basically, again, remember, these are just estimations. Since we already have the actuals, we can just replan to make our life easier instead of causing conflict in updating of the freight orders.
Brian,
yes, Sasha.
What you are asking is okay if the freight was not already established and purchased, but you know, I'm asking, when we tender the freight, there is no stages there, so our planned stage might not be correct. So once we get information back from the freight forwarder about the route, then we have to amend those stages. And there is no point of deleting them, because then if we delete the initial one, then they will not be able to access them. So they will not have the freight order numbers that they have to deal with. So it has to be then communicated separately to vendor. So actually the question is, once everything is done and you are well aware that the stage is different and the route is different than the one planned, would it be possible to add additional stages?
Okay, so two things. First, even if I deleted these freight orders and planned again, what I would simply have to do is reassign those new freight orders to the actual freight forwarder. So they would have access to them anyway, but I would have to go through the reassignment process all over again. Okay, so that could be possible, and they would have access to those new freight orders. Now, we can't add new freight orders once we have already planned and have, like, for example, 3 freight orders. Let's say we need an extra stage. If I change the handover location in the freight unit, or if I amend these stages in this freight order, for example, that I'm looking on screen now, if I wanted to amend this stage and say, you know what, I want to reflect now the new source destination location for the main stage, if that doesn't automatically provide me with new freight orders that are going to be linking these together, if the system doesn't do that for you, then yes, you would have to delete these freight orders, replan, reassign the carrier to these new freight orders so they have access to it.
So in theory, I cannot change in this particular case, let's say Dubai Airport, Rome Airport, and then add additional stage here, Rome Airport to Brindisi Airport.
So basically, I wouldn't be able to add a new stage here. If there's really no option, let's say if I could, let me see if I can just edit this one. If I wanted to do this accurately, the only thing I can do is change what's there, but I can't add another stage.
Okay, no, not a problem. I was just wondering if this is something that is possible. If not, okay.
Okay, let me take a look at the freight unit this time around, even though we're always told not to make changes in the freight unit itself. But if I go to document flow here and I go to the freight unit, because I know the freight unit stages shows me all different stages, as we see here. If I click on edit, you see here I have an insert option, but it really doesn't allow me to add any new stages. If I make the change here, it doesn't automatically add a new one. You see, if I, let's say, merge, route, transportation proposal, maybe I can go through here, but again, I would be generating new transportation proposals. I have no option to really add a new line stage here. So the best way would be to get rid of the ones that are planned and plan again. Okay, but that would be like my last option. Usually by changing the locations, the system should already provide me with new stages that will link the stages that I'm changing here. Okay, so the system should add them automatically, but you can't add them manually.
Okay, thanks, clear.
All right, thanks. Thank you for that question. Very good question. Any other, let's see, I have one more in the chat. An emission who is responsible to assign carrier, procurement, or MOVCON. Okay, so basically it would be anyone with the roles of TS02, TS08, which in this case will probably be assigned to those in procurement more than those in MOVCON. MOVCON would be more linked to the roles of TS01, 08, which are 07, sorry, which are planning. Okay, planning transportation and updating events. Procurement would be basically linked to more of the roles of TS02 and 08 who are managing freight orders, who are making these changes, assigning the carriers, assigning the freight PO, making changes of the estimated transportation proposal to the actual transportation proposal, okay, because they're the ones who have the direct access to that information. Okay, Mohammed?
Brian, sorry.
Yes.
In relation to this, just a suggestion, since you guys are in contact with the hub, with the Himanshu and other guys, it appears, at least I spoke to a couple of missions, there is a big debate in the mission between procurement, MOVCON, who is doing what. Would it be possible that some kind of maybe suggestion of some kind of policy or guidance is issued globally and tell mission that they need to determine this themselves? And that has to be issued as a policy, because right now, whoever you speak with, it says it's not my job, it's other one. And I don't think that will lead us anywhere until somebody really clearly state you have to assign people and put a policy who is doing what, otherwise we're not going to have any updates in the system, or it will be very late. Nothing to do with you, sorry, but it was an interesting question that I don't think it's everybody is questioning right now in many entities.
Absolutely, Sasha, you're absolutely right. It's true that I can't make those decisions, but I can definitely bring it up to them, and I will when we meet with them. This has been asked already from before, back in the conference in Entebbe. It was done again in the workshop in Valencia, and it's being asked constantly by people now in the teachback. So you're absolutely right. Hopefully we can get a policy or guidance on this. So I'll bring this up in our next meeting. Thank you. So basically, besides that, what I wanted to show you guys, let's say if the case was, as I was discussing with Sasha, if we're making updates to the either freight unit or the freight order, and we realize that the changes that we're making to the main carriage or the Incoterm location are not really providing us with those stages that are linking them all together, or we have a conflict in the planning versus the actual route that the carrier is taking, we always have an option of deleting these freight orders and then replanning. Once we replan, we'll have a new set of freight orders that we'll have to reassign to the carrier so that they have access to them in CCP as well. So how do we get rid of the freight orders that we have already planned, right? So if I'm looking at my document flow here under my freight unit, I see that I have 3 freight orders, right? The vendor delivered stage stays the way it is. The only ones we can get rid of here are the ones for the carrier. Remember, when I was planning, the stage for the vendor delivered was already there, was already planned for me. So I don't have to get rid of this one. I can always replan as long as I get rid of the other 2. And to do that, we would have to navigate to each one of these, and you have to do it in sequence. Okay, so basically, let me close, sorry, the freight order that I have open there. So we'd have to go, and we could always check and see which one is the main carriage and which one is the on carriage. If we select, for example, 7.5, I can take a look at which one this is if I go to my stages tab under my freight order, and I can see that this one is the one from source location, Brindisi Airport to destination location, the actual mission itself, right? So we see it here. So this would be the correct procedure. We'd have to go first to the last stage, delete it, then go to the next stage and delete it, so on all the way up to the first stage. Okay, so I'm at the last stage, and we have an option here when we click on edit to cancel this document. Okay, we could always, you don't see that here. Basically, you see that we have options like refresh, copy, check, follow-up, scheduling, subcontracting. We have tons of options, but I don't see anything that says either cancel or delete, right? If you see the 2 arrows here that say more, we have an option here for cancel document. Okay, we basically can cancel this document and we'll get a warning that says cannot be reverted. So continue. Yes, we can continue, and the document disappears directly from my screen. I'm saying, okay, so what happened to that one? Basically, I go back to my freight unit. I see all my freight orders. I can refresh, and now my freight order has disappeared from here. Now I only have 1 freight forwarder delivered. If I click on this one as well, and I do the same process, I go to edit, select the more option here, and I cancel this document as well. Now we can get rid of the 2 last stages. So basically what I've done is deleted the stages that I have initially planned. So they're both gone now. Now the only thing I have is what I had initially, my vendor delivered stage here, 28281. So what I would have to do is now the TM planner would have to come back into play, replan this freight unit, get your new freight orders, and now the TS02, TS08 would have to come back to TM, reassign those. Okay, so that would be the process. If, let's say, when we change the main carriage or we change the handover location, there was a conflict in the planning, and now we have to, instead of continuing with the process of updating the freight orders, is delete them and then plan all over again. Okay, so basically that would cover what I wanted to cover in this session. I know there's 5 minutes, but we can extend it just a little bit. We could always refresh this screen as well, and we should see maybe that, yes, you see the other freight orders have disappeared. We could always go back to now our DTR, check for now my DTR here that I was looking at before, or maybe let's get rid of that one, and we can also, let's perform the search that we did before. We can either do it by date like I did before. I was going from November, I was going all the way to May, let's say 30th. I clicked on apply, and I would have all my inbounds and DTRs all over again. So basically you could either go through this process again of arranging your documents. You could always just go to the delivery date and say, you know, descending. I want to make sure that the ones for December are still there. Remember to add your Incoterm field, which is also always very useful. If I go to the filter, again, this is just a quick review of what I was doing initially, Incoterm, And we have here our selection. We add it to our column, basically because I just want to show you guys the ones that I was looking at before. Let me also put the dates in the correct order so that I can see the dates that I want to plan for. So I have my delivery date is over here, delivery date from. I'm going to push that up to the top, click on OK, and basically now I have the display that I had initially when I started this session. So we have here, I can always drag over the life cycle status, which will help me know which ones are planned or in planning status, execution as well. And here we go. So now we have the same display as we had before. We have our DTRs, we have our original delivery, POs, and let's say that we were planning the one for 812, which was the inbound delivery 812. I think we were planning this one, 75812, which is this one over here. See, and it's back to FCA, the date is correct, and it's back to in planning lifecycle status. So it wasn't planned because I deleted the freight order. So I could restart the process now as the planner, go back to the transportation cockpit, go back to planning, and now select a planning option that reflects, and hopefully the system doesn't crash on me, that reflects the planning route that the freight forwarders have returned to us. Okay, again, so you would go through the process, select the ones that are packaged, make sure that you're selecting the accurate one. So we have our freight units, we have our DTRs. We could always link them to the inbounds. I know it was the one ending in 50. So here we go. We have our latest option here. Again, it's still split into the two previous stages that we planned before. So remember, every time you see a freight unit duplicated, you should always select them both. The system is really just showing me the last planning. Sasha? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed something and it would be good to clarify it. I think initially, you see, we had the Dubai Port, Brindisi Port. You have changed them in the freight orders that were deleted, and now the DTR kept the airport as a route rather than originally it was port, if I recall correctly.
Absolutely. I realized that as well. I see that now it's showing me the latest change that I made to it. What I wanted to see is that if I go to proposals, it's only going to show me airport proposals this time instead of maybe any other option. So I'm going to see if that affects it in any way. Maybe it's just the system remembering the last change that I made to it. But as you see, none of these were planned. So hopefully with the proposals can also show me other options. Okay, if not, this is something I can take note of too. Okay, well, let me just go through that quickly. Again, transportation cockpit. So while I go through this one more time quickly, I see that in the chat we have other questions here. TS01 and 07 can also assign carrier, right? If the information is provided by TS. Okay, in terms of should they don't have the role to do so, and in production they should have a limitation. Okay, TS01s and 7 shouldn't have the role to assign the carrier. It should only be given to the TS02s and 08s in production, okay? Because if not, then really why do we have two different roles for that? We have another question here from Adrian. The planner should not assign a carrier as this constitutes a, okay, very good. So thank you. Okay, only FO manager should assign carrier, very good. So I'm glad we're on the same page. And one more in case so before I read this question, which is quite long here from Jamil, let me just run through this quickly. Go to the cockpit once again and see if this time it goes through. If not, I'll try it a third time. The third time it worked. We're selecting the 2. I just want to make sure that now, as Sasha observed here, that the airport is the last location. If I select these 2 and plan, am I getting only airport proposals or am I getting something else? Okay. And again, I'm not sure. I didn't even save the changes that I made to the freight orders, so I don't know why the changes were saved here. You did. I did save?
Yeah, because you were getting errors. That's why
Okay.
You thought to cancel, but you saved initially.
All right. Okay, so the good thing is that I see that my modes of transportation are still, I still have options for C. So it doesn't mean that now I've reduced my transportation options to only air.
Yeah,
So
but
basically,
sorry, Brian, but it is, you see, it's giving you airport to port now, additional stages, so it's not.
okay, let me see. Dubai Airport to port. Okay, it's giving me additional stages to the ones I had before. That is true, at least for the first proposals here. Yep, you're right. So I have an extra stage almost for every single option that is showing me an airport location, but basically from an airport to the port, which is quite strange. It should go from airport to airport and then transport, especially because it shows me the means of transport, which is road here. So this could be a bit. I would like to see how this works in production, if it's going
Would
to
it
do
be
the same thing.
would it be possible to know, to show us maybe if you have time, or if you, I don't know, you didn't plan to accept the route and then delete these stages and see how that works? Rather than accept planning, you accept route and then do modification there. Is
That
that
is that is a that is a very good alternative. Why not? Let's see. Let's since we're already testing all kinds of things, let's do that, right? Let me just select this.
sorry, Brian.
Let me select this proposal, and instead of accepting planning, we accept the route. Now, we haven't done that in any other session before because I wanted to keep it just strictly understand how to plan, but this would be a good option. And let's see if this works, because the route, what this does, and for other students to understand, is that I'm only accepting individual stages. So it doesn't necessarily mean I'm accepting the whole planning. Let me see how that works. So I'm going to accept the route, and that should divide my freight unit, the one ending in 50, into all those different stages. So let me make this a bit bigger here and see that we have 50 4 times, and we have the sections here. The only problem is that I have my source location is already going to an airport. So that's my main mistake here. The source location shouldn't be going to an airport. So basically, this is the one from the vendor delivered stage. So I think I should delete this one as well to avoid this conflict. Okay, so I should probably go back, delete the freight order for the vendor delivered stage, and then do the let it reset itself, because I think that's what's causing my major issue here. The fact that my vendor delivered stage is already changed. Remember that conflict, that the warning message that I got? It automatically updated my first stage to source to airport instead of port. And that's really conflicting with everything else. And I think that's why I have a nice here conflict sign. See, even when I hover over it, it tells me conflict between FU booking times. So I think that's what I should do. I should go back to that freight order, delete the one for vendor stage, have it automatically plan itself again to the actual port location, or maybe I can plan it myself and also say that it's going to a different location, and then I can avoid all this. Because if my source is already wrong, the rest of them are not going to be correct, even if I plan the routes.
And this is great learning, because it just tells us that we need to be very careful when we are changing something, because we might end up with something like this actually. So
Absolutely. So that's why thank you, Sasha, for these questions, because they always challenge my trainings. And sometimes they work fine, and sometimes I just make a fool out of myself. But in this case, this was a great example. Okay, this is actually something that we should all pay attention to. When I made a change in the main carriage of my freight order, I automatically made everything go haywire, right? Even my initial vendor freight order. And I should change that. So this was actually great learning, okay? We have to also get rid of the vendor delivered stage because it was changed automatically. And that's really conflicting with any other planning I do after that. So very good. I would have to delete this one and then replan from scratch. Okay, guys, so I know we're 6 minutes past the time. Let me just read one more question we had from Jamil here. So this is a specific case for UNSO UNSCO. It says here, a case for a set of FOs that needed to be canceled, which we did. Once we went back to the plan, FOs in transportation cockpit, TM was blocking the legs which were planned before. Therefore, the hub advised that once we need to delete the FOs, we have delete the FOs, including the automatically create. You see, everything that's happening today, I'm explaining something, and you guys were already answering those questions in the chat before that. So thank you, guys. Thanks, Adrian. Also, you, Sasha, and yourself, Frey, and you, Jamil, because actually, Jamil, this case is exactly the case we're going through here. So the blocking is happening with the automatically created freight order. So we have to delete that one as well and then generate new proposals. Okay, very good. So basically, we're all on the same page. So we had our conflicts and we all solved them here together. So hopefully this was a good learning experience for all of you guys. Okay, we learned how to assign the carriers. We learned how to assign the freight PO. We learned how to change the charges, change the locations, the dates. We also saw that we had a conflict and that could happen in FCA scenarios, especially because if we're talking about an X-work scenario, we wouldn't have this conflict as we would delete all the freight orders. We have this conflict because we have an automatically generated freight order that we should also delete and then start from scratch. Okay, guys. So thank you all for joining the session. I have recorded this one as well. I'll send a link to this one to all of you. I'm going to make sure, Sasha, I bring the policy and guidance on who should be doing what for procurement and MoveCon. And basically, that's it. Hopefully, you guys learned as much as I did today as well. Okay, I love it when we have a real case scenario and conflicts like this in a training. Okay, it helps us all learn a lot. So thank you guys and see you tomorrow. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Brian. This was great. Thanks.
Thank you.